Step aside, you no-good troublemakers. There's a new cap in town. After the events of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Sam Wilson is ready to lead us into a bold new stage of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as the second Captain America. However, the mantle isn't without its share of problems, and Sam should expect to find himself going up against some pretty powerful bad guys sooner rather than later. Who, do you ask? Well, let's take a look at 12 villains the new Captain America could fight and find out. Our first entry on this list is the HYDRA-fied version of Steve Rogers from 2017's Secret Empire event. I can feel the angry comments already.
Let the hate flow through you.
For those of you who don't know, in 2017, writer Nick Spencer shocked and horrified the world by having the first Captain America, Steve Rogers himself, declare "Hail Hydra." This seemed to imply that Steve had actually been an undercover Hydra operative all along, but it turned out that the Red Skull had used the physical manifestation of the Cosmic Cube to rewrite reality.
This is starting to sound like a bad comic book plot.
So how could this translate to the MCU? Well, Red Skull and Steve are both still alive, but neither of them are really in a place where the Cosmic Cube business would make any sense. Instead, I propose that Hydra Cap could be a variant from another dimension, who invades our Earth following the events of No Way Home and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Steve Rogers is the one foe that could truly make Sam Wilson stop in his tracks, and it would be fascinating to see Steve's dedication and love of his country perverted into blind loyalty to Hydra. Plus, it would give Chris Evans the chance to show off a more villainous side, which is not something we get to see very often. I will admit, this one's a bit of a long shot, but if he's done right, Hydra Cap could go down as one of Marvel's most memorable villains. You know, I really feel like I was born in the wrong generation. Back in the 1980s, you could hang out with your friends and dress up in snake-themed costumes and no one would bat an eye. Just you and your pals absolutely vibing out. Unfortunately, nowadays, you get labeled as some sort of supervillain group. Pfft, imagine. The Serpent We Live in a Society is a recurring group of Captain America villains, who, despite their fairly prominent status in the comics, have never really gotten enough love in my estimation. They're more than just your typical gimmicky supervillain group, and they actually are more similar to a supervillain labor union than anything else. The group's members all share profits and look after each other, which really creates a sense of camaraderie and helps them to work more efficiently. In 2015, the Society rebranded themselves as Serpent Solutions, a strategy and consulting organization who handled the more unsavory operations of other big corporations. Despite this revamp giving them much more legitimacy in the eyes of the public, its members were still up to their sinister tricks. They fought Sam Wilson's Captain America, but were defeated by him and his new ally, Joaquin Torres. With Hydra having been wiped out in the MCU, we need a new evil organization to keep things interesting. I think that Serpent Solutions would fit this role particularly well, especially considering the fact that Falcon and the Winter Soldier put both Sam and Torres in their proper places for an adaptation. The idea of a bunch of bad guys running around in snake-themed costumes doesn't exactly seem like it would fit very well into the current MCU, but there's just the right amount of espionage and corruption involved with Serpent Solutions to render them as ideal candidates to be the new Hydra. We really need some more female villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, who do we got so far? Ghost? Agatha Harkness? Flag Smasher? Pfft, yeah, okay. We gotta step it up. So that's why I think we should see Viper, real name Ophelia Sarkeesian, make her MCU debut in the near future. Ophelia has connections to various criminal groups, including previously having served as the leader of both HYDRA and the Serpent Society, and she also has a long and complicated history with Wolverine. She's skilled in the use of poisons, as you'd expect from someone who uses a snake motif, but her most dangerous trait is her brilliant and cunning mind. Viper will stop at nothing to take over the world, and she's proven herself to be one of Captain America's most dedicated foes. She's a great example of a femme fatale villain, and her presence would help shake things up and generally make things less of a sausage party over there in the MCU. Viper could even bring the Serpent Society with her, establishing herself as a true force to be reckoned with thanks to her command over the venomous group. We've previously seen an adaptation of Ophelia in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but considering the fact that not even Marvel seems to know whether that show is canon anymore, I'm holding out hope that a proper version of the Viper will strike soon. You know, it's cool that Steve Rogers got to retire and have a happy ending and all that, but that man definitely left more than a couple messes for Sam Wilson to clean up. For example, does anyone really believe that Arnim Zola is permanently dead? I mean, sure, his digital consciousness in Camp Lehi got blown up by a missile, but what if all but confirmed that there are more copies of him still out there? Zola's the sole reason that HYDRA was able to survive to the modern day, and it stands to reason that he'd want to keep their spirit alive. With the OG Cap out of the way, now would be a great time for Zola to finally transfer himself into that crazy robotic body and make his grand return. And I'm not just talking about him going into Vision's body like he did in What If. I'm talking orange and purple, little camera on his head, the whole shebang. It would be a ton of fun to see how the much more down-to-earth Sam Wilson would react to the absolute absurdity that is Arnim Zola's comic book body, and having him fight one of Steve's oldest foes would really help to cement his place in the legacy of Captain America. You want to talk about daddy issues? Try having your dad be the leader of an international terror organization with a blood-red skull for a face. Doesn't really get much more complicated than that. Cynthia Schmidt is the daughter of the Red Skull, the founder of HYDRA. After debuting as a telekinetic villain called Sister Sin, Cynthia eventually lost her powers and simplified her name to just Sin, joining her father's organization and beginning a relationship with the villain Crossbones. From birth, Cynthia was indoctrinated to have the same bigoted and downright evil worldview as her father, and she's a true believer in HYDRA. Everything she does is to advance her father's goals, which of course brings her into conflict with Captain America. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Red Skull's still trapped on Vormir, at least as far as we know, but his legacy could live on with the introduction of Sin. Many of the MCU's iconic heroes have passed on their names to younger successors in recent years, so why not flip this trend on its head and allow Cynthia to take up her father's villainous mantle? It would be a great parallel to the journey that Sam Wilson has taken so far, and it would provide him with an iconic foe to remind him of the dangers of being Captain America. Even though they have the same name, the organization known as the Secret Empire doesn't actually have anything to do with that controversial comic storyline we talked about earlier. Instead, they're an incredibly secretive cabal with the goals of causing destruction and taking over the world. Yeah, we've never seen any of those in the Marvel Universe. The Secret Empire initially started out as a subdivision of HYDRA, but as their power and influence grew, they quickly became their own standalone group. Their actions are primarily decided by their leading Council of Nine, and their schemes have included transforming people into superhuman villains, kidnapping the X-Men to harness their powers, and more. In one of the most bizarre stories involving the group, it was revealed that their leader was actually Richard Nixon, who was trying to stage a coup to amass power during the Watergate scandal. That's a real thing. I didn't make that up. Although they were never referred to by their proper name, an MCU adaptation of the Secret Empire did appear in Agent Carter, where they were revealed to be pulling the strings behind several major events in American politics. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. hinted that the group ended up being absorbed into HYDRA, which opens the door for the Secret Empire to rise from the ashes of that once powerful organization, following in the footsteps of their comic incarnation. You gotta love a top secret organization that just straight up puts the word secret in their name. Gotta get that brand recognition, or lack of recognition, which I guess is what they want. I primarily talked about new villains so far in this video, but I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to reflect on foes from the MCU's past, but not too far in the past. Like a year ago. Listen, I'm talking about Taskmaster, alright? Black Widow introduced us to Antonia Dreykov, the brainwashed daughter of General Dreykov, who is the leader of the Red Room Academy. After being gravely injured as a child in an explosion caused by Natasha Romanoff, Antonia was fitted with cybernetic enhancements that allowed her to mimic the fighting style of any foe she went up against. She ended up being freed from her father's control by Natasha and escaped into the world to pursue an as-of-yet unknown future. While Antonia is a silent and completely subservient killer in the MCU, the comic version of Taskmaster, who is a man named Tony Masters, is a quick-witted, rough-and-tumble mercenary who sells his services to the highest bidder. The character's movie adaptation was met with considerable criticism, thanks to the fact that she barely resembles her comic book counterpart, so it wouldn't surprise me if Marvel brought her back for a more faithful second time around. Having had some time to figure out who she wants to be, Antonia could become a mercenary that ends up butting heads with Captain America. The comic book Taskmaster is one of the best fighters in the Marvel Universe, so it would be great to see the movie version live up to this standard by going up against one of the MCU's most prominent heroes. Sometimes, you gotta have a villain who's just a straight-up vampire. Batman fought Dracula, Spider-Man's got
Dr. Michael Morbius at your service.
And Captain America has Baron Blood. Having been turned into a vampire by Count Dracula, complete with the weaknesses to sunlight and silver and everything, Baron Blood was a recurring foe of the Invaders, whose lineup included Steve Rogers during World War II. After the war ended, Blood came to the United States, where he continued to fight Cap and his allies. His vendetta against Captain America even extended to Sam Wilson, and he pretty recently fought Sam as part of a scheme devised by HYDRA. Admittedly, Baron Blood is one of the sillier villains on this list, but his vampire gimmick, as well as his literal thirst for blood, would bring a new flavor,
and I thought my jokes were bad,
to the MCU. I don't think he could carry a whole movie by himself, but he would make a great supporting villain, similarly to the roles that Batroc and Crossbones served in the past. Plus, he'd be yet another addition to the list of evil Marvel aristocrats.
So all this time you've been rich?
The Watchdogs exemplify the worst parts of America. They're bigoted, violent fearmongers who will stop at nothing to restore what they see as traditional American values. Essentially, they represent everything that Captain America stands against. During their first fight against the Star-Spangled Man, John Walker was actually the one holding the shield, and he found himself conflicted because he realized that he sympathized with the Watchdogs on a lot of issues, until they killed his parents. Luckily, Steve Rogers got the shield back before long and proceeded to put the group in their place in each subsequent encounter. The Watchdogs previously appeared in seasons 3 and 4 in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where they were reimagined as an anti-Inhuman hate group. That's all well and good, and it served the show's overall story well, but if they show up again, I would really prefer it if they were depicted with their ideology from the comics. The fact that Captain America, the ultimate symbol of American patriotism, is now a black man would surely drive them crazy, and I would absolutely love to watch Sam Wilson tear these idiots a new one. They wouldn't be very pleasant or fun villains, that's for certain, but Marvel Studios could use them to tackle some very real, very serious issues that are present in our world. Beliefs similar to the Watchdogs have become more and more prevalent in recent years, and their appearance in the MCU would allow Marvel to deliver a firm statement that we can't stand for such hatred and bigotry. Here's a villain who is long overdue for a big screen debut, but at the same time, I also understand why. MODOK is a giant floating head with little arms and little legs. He flies around in his hover chair and he shoots lasers at people from his headband. And he's also the leader of one of the Marvel Universe's biggest evil organizations, AIM. There's a lot more I could say about him, but I mean, just look at him. He's MODOK. Now, there have been a number of reports about MODOK joining the MCU over the years. Oh, Jim Carrey's gonna play MODOK. Oh, Yellow Jacket's gonna get turned into MODOK. Well, it hasn't happened yet. Have you seen a giant floating head anywhere? That one doesn't count. While the MCU may have started out trying to be at least somewhat realistic, now we got time travel and multiverses and celestials and all that jazz. So I really don't see any reason why they shouldn't bring MODOK in. His first appearance took place in an issue of Captain America, and he spent his first few years strictly as a foe of Cap's before branching out. I think that would be a great way to introduce him into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, since his hover chair would allow him to keep up with Sam's ability to fly, and his advanced intellect would force Sam to find a different way to fight him than he's used to. I'll be honest though, I just really want to see MODOK anywhere in the MCU. He's such a great character. Give him a Disney Plus show where he teams up with, I don't know, Big Wheel or someone. I'll watch it. I'll probably be the only one, but I'll watch it. Steve Rogers, Sam Wilson, and Bucky Barnes may be the most well-known people to have held the Captain America identity, but there are actually several other people who have briefly taken up the mantle over the years. Most of them had good intentions, but not William Burnside. In the 1950s, Burnside and a boy named Jack Monroe injected themselves with super soldier serums and became new versions of Captain America and Bucky. Unfortunately, the serums that they took were flawed, and Burnside and Monroe became increasingly unstable, eventually turning against the US government and acting on their own accord. While Monroe ended up mostly reforming and becoming the street-level vigilante nomad, Burnside just continued to descend into madness. So where could Burnside show up in the MCU? Well, in Black Widow. Red Guardian briefly mentions fighting Captain America in the 1980s. Obviously, Steve Rogers was still on the ice at this point, but we know that the government was trying to create new super soldiers for years, something we saw firsthand with Isaiah Bradley. So, could Alexei have fought Burnside while he was secretly carrying the mantle? Alexei's claim that
this shield, that he carries with him like a precious baby blanket. I take it, I push him out the window. I make my escape.
Could explain where he's been if they decide to bring him in. And I know that I mentioned that Burnside was active during the 50s in the comics, but, we could just adjust the timescale. That's not a big deal. Maybe he could return in the present day with a grudge against Sam Wilson's Cap, seeing him as an imposter to a title that he believes he should hold. You could even bring Alexei back if we wanted to connect things full circle to Black Widow. Last up on our list is Dr. Faustus. His real name is Johann Fenhoff, and he's a master of hypnotism, a skill which he regularly uses to try and drive Captain America and the other heroes of the Marvel Universe insane. Since he has no actual powers, Faustus definitely relies more on his brains than his brawn, preferring to get other villains like Moonstone and our pal William Burnside to do his dirty work. Johann Fenhoff already appeared in Season 1 of Agent Carter, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. contained several references to his appearance there. But at this point, Marvel's really picking and choosing what isn't canon from their pre-Disney Plus shows. They could easily retcon parts of Agent Carter so that they could use Faustus in the present day, and I think he would make a great cerebral foe for Sam Wilson's Cap. No Cap. God, I was trying to resist the urge to say it the whole video. Hey everybody, I'm Matt Sonnack, I made this video, and I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to go pitch that MODOK Big Wheel buddy comedy series to Marvel Studios.